To summarize what we've gone over in episodes 1 through 4, weightlifting's a sport. And like you would in any sport, you, the athlete, need to be paying attention to what your body is doing instead of what the barbell is doing. When you're braced properly, you generate power against the floor. And by using your midline to direct that power, you ensure that the barbell takes the strongest path towards the best possible finish position. In episode 4, we covered the basics of aiming by covering what your midline is and why it's important, how to use it, and how to direct your barbell towards it. Now, while you shouldn't skip any episodes in this series at all, episode 4 is required viewing for this one because everything that we're going to be going over in this video assumes that you feel very comfortable with the information from the last one. Now, if you remember what we worked on in the last video, it's really simple work to use your midline to aim a barbell when you're standing up straight and that barbell's in your hands. There's not a lot of moving pieces, it's really easy to visualize your target, and honestly, it's more about holding still than anything else. But the problem is, in Olympic weightlifting, that barbell starts on the floor. So we have to figure out some way to fold you up to get you down there with it. Luckily, we're not changing anything to do that. None of the bracing or the aiming that you've worked on up to this point changes. We just have to add one more piece to the puzzle. When you're standing up straight and your braces are locked in place, every part of your body, from the base of your neck down to the floor, is locked in around your center of gravity. Now, when we talk about your midline like that, it's really easy to view it like it's a static position that you're holding on to. And when you're standing up straight with your hands over your head, it is. But in order to let that barbell get any closer to the floor, you need to start thinking of the midline not as a static position to be held onto, but as a vertical axis that we're trying to move along. The front edge of your heel is your midline's connection to the floor. Now, I like to visualize it as the center point of the horizontal line across a cartoon boot print in the mud. Now, it should be pretty obvious why this very specific little dot on your foot and the floor matters so much if you think about everything that we've gone over up to this point. Your midline is the strongest point in your body, and your foot's connection to the floor is the only place where you're able to generate power. So if you can successfully use that spot on the floor to control and aim your lifts, you'll be generating power in the strongest possible position. Luckily, the easiest way to lock your balance and your aim into those center positions is to spread your toes out, clamp down in a tripod, and hold as strong of an arch on the floor as you can. And if you imagine a tripod again, the weight that it's distributing is not necessarily over any one of those 3 points, but it's stacked directly in the middle. Now, that middle position for your foot and your arch is the front edge of your heel. So by bracing properly, you can really lock in your aim with less effort. And when done properly, those two actually work really well together to help make each other stronger. So now we're gonna get into how to feel and use your midline as an axis. Before breaking down how to pick a barbell up off the floor, we're first going to let the barbell get closer to the floor by performing a squat. Aiming a squat along the axis of your midline is as simple as locking in all 3 of your braces perfectly and allowing your legs to move, just like how a press and a muscle snatch work for your upper body. Now, there is a balance factor at play here that your body might not want to naturally follow, so we're going to cover that first. Before we actually squat, it's really important to note that a solid brace from your back and your abs does not mean that your torso will remain vertical while moving. This is a big misconception, and it's a tendency that a lot of people have when they try to squat here, because by keeping your torso super vertical, it feels like you're locking in a really good brace. But when you squat like that, what you're actually doing is changing the way that your hips move. And what that's doing is shifting your center of gravity forward into a less stable and weaker position. When your balance or your center of gravity shifts away from your midline, you're no longer generating power in the most efficient position that you could. But if you're breaking away from an ideal position while moving, there's an even easier tell. Even if you've braced your upper body perfectly, If your center of gravity is shifting forward while you're moving, I would bet that you're not holding a solid tripod and a good arch against the floor. So now we're getting back into episode 1 territory. The way that you can perform an efficient, balanced, and strong squat is by focusing on your brace and your aim. And also your tempo, but don't worry, we're gonna get into that in the next episode. By prioritizing your braces, all 3 of your braces, and your midline's connection to the floor, what we're calling your aim, you lock your body into the right positioning, making it impossible to break unless you change something. So in order to feel that properly, we're gonna do some 10-second squats. Grab your barbell or a broomstick, or if you're at home, just stand up and pretend you're holding onto something. Stand with the barbell on your back and brace your lats around your spine. Press your abs out as hard as you can and set both feet with the most aggressive tripod and arch that you can. This squat should take you a solid 10 seconds to drop down, so the key here is to move as slow as you possibly can. Keep your mind's eye on the front of your heel while maintaining a rigid hold in all 3 braces, and start dropping your hips back and down so that you stay balanced on your midline. Your range of motion should be completely determined by your ability to hold your braces perfectly. If you relax your back, let the tension out of your abs, lose a point of your tripod, or feel your feet collapse or roll out, stand up and start over. Once you've dropped as low as you possibly can go, which might not be very low at all, maintain a perfect brace and use your midline to press into the floor to stand up. Be careful not to collapse your arches when you press, but use your arches to maintain a strong connection to your midline. The way that you use the arches of your feet to build tension and then push away from the floor is really easy to conceptualize if you imagine catching a basketball in a chest pass and then throwing it right back out. When you catch the ball, you're catching it with your entire hand, even though what's actually touching the ball is just a couple fingertips and the base of your palm. So you're using an arch in your hand to absorb the ball, build tension, and then send it right back out in the opposite direction. You wouldn't catch a ball with just the base of your palms because you're not gonna catch it easily, and then you're not gonna be able to throw it really far. And for that exact same reason, you don't wanna squat or do any lower body movements by just using your heel or just focusing on any other one part of your foot as opposed to the entire thing. Perform a minimum of 5 reps here. You may have been disappointed or surprised by your range of motion on the first one, but if you brace and move properly, your range of motion should open up a little bit with each rep. Even still, you probably won't get as low as you normally would in a squat, but that's okay. We're gonna be getting way deeper into why that might be happening and how to play with your positioning in episode 7. Take your time here. Do as many reps as you want to. You should feel your braces and your aim working together to keep you balanced and make your positions, your muscles, and your joints more powerful. Once you feel comfortable here, let's add the final piece to the aiming puzzle. To deadlift, it's important to note that we are still not changing anything. The way that you brace and the way that you aim is all the exact same, but we're finally putting that barbell down on the ground in front of you. And in order to do that well, we want to keep using your midline to do all of the work. Just like how holding your feet braced against the floor makes it possible for your lower body to use your midline, keeping your back and your abs braced is how we're going to transfer that power from the floor all the way up to overhead. To do that, just like how you visualize the front edge of your heel for your lower body, I want you to visualize the aiming position for your upper body as if you have a yoke running across your back. When braced properly, it's easy to imagine holding a yoke across the backs of your shoulders, and it's important to note here that that yoke is stacked directly with your midline. When you move your hands overhead from any position, you're doing it from the yoke, and your arms should move loosely as if they were just ropes attached to it. Supporting the barbell with the yoke across your back is actually key to relaxing your arms during a deadlift. Your back is much stronger than your arms. And in Olympic weightlifting, we want to save your arms for the turnover of the snatch or the clean. So we don't really want them to work really hard during all of that space between the floor and the tops of your legs. Again, the only way that you can relax your arms during a pull is to focus on holding the weight with the yoke across your back. And when the barbell is below your waist, The only way that you can actually do that is to move the yoke across your back out on top of the barbell. Now, when I move my yoke out over the bar, I'm not even tempted to early arm bend because using my arms is not gonna benefit me at all. My lats are already pulled back as tight as they can be, so anything I do with my arms is just gonna translate into an upright row, and that feels really hard, so I don't wanna do that. But if you notice how far away this barbell is from me, obviously that's not good for lifting. But I'm not thinking about my tripod or my arch or my midline at all. So as soon as I lock my foot into the right position, my yoke stays stacked directly over the barbell and my foot is stacked on top of my midline with no effort at all, just like it should be. All right, so now let's put all of this together into a good solid deadlift. So grab your barbell or your PVC and do this along with me. Put the bar on your back in a snatch or wide grip and set all 3 braces. Extend your lats around your spine, engaging the yoke that will control all of your upper body movement. Press your abs out to connect your lower body and your upper body, and hold the floor with your feet to establish the strongest connection you can to generate power. From here, use your yoke to perform a behind the neck press. This should move in a completely vertical track along your midline. Now, without releasing any tension from anywhere else, relax your arms to allow the barbell to drop to your hips. If you feel yourself roll your shoulders forward or lose any tension around your spine or on the floor, start over. It is incredibly important for you to be able to move your arms and legs in these positions without moving anything else. Once the bar is on your hip, we'll start dropping into an extremely slow deadlift by shifting your hips back over the front of your heel and lowering towards the floor. At the exact same time and rate, the yoke across your back should drop down over the bar so that you have vertical arms hanging down with no tension. Your foot's balance is along your midline, just like in a squat, and that barbell should be hovering effortlessly just off your leg. Lower your body into your normal mid-shin start position, unless you're unable to maintain proper braces, in which case it may take some feet shuffling or a few slow reps to slowly open up your range of motion. Once you've lowered to the floor position, reverse direction by focusing on driving your foot through the front of your heel and standing the yoke across your back all the way up to your midline. There's a lot of ways to subtly do this incorrectly and not know it. So for that reason, I would suggest doing this with a friend or recording yourself from a 90-degree angle so that you can assess after each movement. Here's a few examples of poor movement during a pull, as well as why it's happening and what you can do to fix it. Probably the most common fault here is to confuse your traps with the yoke across your back, and it's actually the exact same error as forcing your torso to stay too vertical in a squat. By hyper-focusing on tight braces, you completely lose perspective on your aim. So in the same way that your yoke collapses away from the bar, your center of gravity or aim will shift into the ball of your foot. This positioning stops you from efficiently using your hamstrings, butt, and low back to direct the barbell behind your head. So as the bar gets heavier and heavier, your body will be pulled toward it on the way up, and you'll either slingshot it and jump really far backward, or you'll kick the barbell really far away from your torso. Either way, you're not sending it to the ceiling. To correct this issue, prioritize spreading out as you go down. You need to feel your back half engage and allow your back to drop out over the bar. I promise it's not as far as you think. You'll know you're doing it correctly if the bar feels like dead weight hanging straight down in your hands and it's sliding effortlessly along your leg. The opposite problem happens when you send your yoke way too far over the bar, which also has the same effect on your feet, forcing your aim way too far back in your heel. Similarly to being stacked too vertically, this will cause you to create a ton of unnecessary horizontal movement when you're standing up. It also generally includes a lot of excessive use of the arms. In this position, you can't relax your arms because if you did, the bar would swing out away from your body. I find this happens most often from a lifter not setting an appropriate brace in their torso before beginning the lift. If you set your back while you're moving instead of before, you'll always have a tendency to send yourself too far forward and row with your biceps. Leaving your yoke out over the bar at the top is another extremely common fault. When you pull, you have to worry about 2 aiming positions, but everything else we've done has only had 1. You have to maintain a strong hold on your midline, and you also have to allow your yoke to drop out over the bar. But if you focus too much on yoke over the bar, it's easy to let the barbell control the positioning of the lift instead of you. Notice how the position of the bar is not getting any closer to my midline at the top of my pull. If this is you, you either jump really far forward on your turnovers, or you have a real problem making the bar get high enough to catch. The only option you have here is to swing your hips into the bar, which slows down your vertical force and sends the barbell horizontally away from you. That might feel easier when it's light, but that won't help you at all when the bar is heavy. This position is happening because you're paying attention to the barbell instead of your aim through the floor. When standing up straight, your yoke is directly over the front of your heel. You have to spread out to go down, but you don't want to stay spread out to stand back up. By allowing your yoke to stay over the bar, you're allowing the barbell to stay in the same horizontal position that it started in, which is not helping you stack the barbell behind your head on top of your midline. The opposite fault would be to stay so concerned with getting back to your midline that you don't unfold in the strongest way to get there. Laying back like this during a pull will do a lot to sling the weight behind you, but it's not allowing you to use your brace and aim to make that barbell go as high as it can. And if the barbell is not going as high as it can, you're not lifting as much as you could. Finally, my biggest pet peeve, shifty feet. If your feet are dancing all over the place, you are not holding a good connection to the floor, and you're missing out on potential strength and speed. The easiest way to really understand why this is bad is to imagine a machine built for the sole purpose of lifting weights. If we hit go and it was moving like this, we would immediately stop that machine and bolt it to the ground. Duh. How else would it lift weights straight up and down efficiently? That comparison is actually the very first realization I had about footwork, which is what started me down this long and obsessive rabbit hole. Even though your deadlift is not going to look like a squat, in the moment to you, it should feel about the exact same because you're focusing on all the same things, holding all 3 of your braces perfectly and using your midline to aim. The position of the barbell, whether it's sitting on your back or sitting on the floor in front of you, does not change how you hold your body, how you brace, or how you use your midline to aim, even though your body's positioning might change some. A squat leaves the barbell on your midline, so you don't really have to worry about the yoke, but all of this becomes a lot less confusing when you realize it all revolves around the same thing, which is treating your midline like a vertical axis that we are trying to move along and move the barbell towards. Okay, as I'm sure you can tell, we are getting really close now. The only thing that we have to add to make what we've already done into a snatch or a clean is some transition footwork. And you do have to move your feet in order to transition around a barbell well. But if you've been paying attention and following closely, what I'm sure you're asking yourself right now is, I thought my feet were supposed to be braced. And if they're braced, that means they can't move. That's kind of the whole point. So if you're supposed to brace your feet for an entire lift, how can you move them? Well, that's where tempo comes into play, which is the last aspect of your lift that you're able to control. I am super excited to get into tempo next because after that we can start lifting. And why else would you be here if you weren't trying to lift a ton of weight? And I know when you have a good handle on how to control your tempo, just like you now have with your bracing and your aiming, your weightlifting is going to get a lot more productive and a whole lot more fun. Please hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button to help me get these videos out there. And if you're struggling with your weightlifting and want some help with either programming or coaching, I work full-time with a small amount of dedicated athletes across all ages and all ability levels. If you take your weightlifting seriously, I want to help you actualize your goals. So check out the options available for you there at www.outofstepbarbell.com.